They say some people chase justice, others chase ghosts. And then there are the people like her, people who spend their nights with a microphone, a dim bulb overhead, and a truth they hope no one else ever recognizes. The studio is nearly silent, except for the soft buzz of old wiring and the woman breathing in and out, steadying herself. She presses record. Her voice is smooth, sorrowful, trained through years of telling stories about women no one else bothered to fight for. This week, she begins, her voice trembling just slightly. We're talking about the murder of 18-year-old Lila Monroe. For her millions of listeners, it sounds like another episode of Unspoken Crimes, the podcast that has clawed its way into America's guilty conscience. But this time, something's off. Her pauses are longer, her breathing is uneven, and her listeners don't know that the killer she's describing sounds a little too familiar. The same neighborhood, the same methods, the same secret she's kept buried for 10 years. Her name is Tasha Green, or at least that's the name the audience knows. Tonight, she isn't just telling a story, she's confessing one. Before Spotify deals, before sold-out live shows, before the Top Podcast of the Year awards, Tasha Green was a one-woman operation recording episodes in her one-bedroom Detroit apartment. Every week she told stories about women who never got justice, black women whose names never made the front page, daughters, sisters, mothers, forgotten by systems that always found a reason to prioritize elsewhere. Detroit, Chicago, Memphis, New Orleans. She'd been everywhere the system cracked. Her audience said she had a gift for getting close to pain. Producers described her voice as a hand on your shoulder in the dark. Even victims' families said she understood them, sometimes better than they understood themselves. But no one knew the real reason she empathized so deeply. No one knew the truth behind her earned calm, the way she could say words like strangled and missing and left by the river without breaking. No one knew what lived behind her eyes. Late at night, when the mics were off and the last upload had processed, she would sit alone in the dark studio, staring at her own reflection in the sound booth window. Because behind her soft voice lived a secret that screamed. She had not always been Tasha Green. 10 years ago, she was Tasha Williams, a scared 17-year-old with a cheap phone, a best friend she adored, and a boyfriend she feared in ways she didn't yet understand. And in the summer of 2013, her best friend, Kira Johnson, vanished after a party, and Tasha never told the full truth about that night. Episode 37 was supposed to be routine, another injustice, another name she hoped people would say out loud for once, another story that might force a detective somewhere to try harder. The victim, Lila Monroe, 18, found dead on the riverbank of Benton Harbor, Michigan. A nursing student, hard-working, beloved, studying part-time while saving up for her own apartment. Tasha flipped through the autopsy report, police statements, timeline logs. Something twisted inside her. The location, the bruises, the sequence of events, the way the victim was found. It was the same pattern, same style, same violent signature as Kira's death 10 years ago. But Kira's case had been ruled an accident. Tasha's fingers went cold around the papers. Her rational mind whispered, coincidence, just coincidence. But then her phone pinged. An email. No subject line, no signature. Just one sentence.
Funny how your stories always sound so personal. Wonder what really happened to Kira Johnson. The room seemed to shrink around her, her heartbeat jammer-hammered against her ribs. Someone knew. Someone had been watching. Someone was connecting dots that were never supposed to be connected. She reread the message 4 times, and then she deleted it. But the imprint stayed, hot and sharp as a burn. She couldn't sleep. Her bones buzzed like someone had wired electricity beneath her skin. At 2 in the morning, she went back to the files. She studied the bruising, the drag marks, the missing shoe, the timeline. There was too much that felt familiar. Lila Monroe was ambitious, trusting, sweet in the way that made people underestimate her. The night she died, she had left a party with someone she knew, someone witnesses described as calm and protective, just like Kira. Tasha's mind replayed the night she'd spent 10 years trying to suffocate. Kira, laughing, dancing, swaying to music that thumped through the summer heat. Marcus, Tasha's boyfriend then, now a detective, circling the party like he owned it. The argument behind the rocks by the riverbank, the scream, the splash, the horrifying silence afterward. Tasha had run home and locked the door. She'd been too scared to dial 911, too scared to tell the truth, too scared to lose him. Marcus had held her afterward. He'd whispered, "We say nothing. It was an accident. Do you understand? We say nothing." She believed him. He had become a detective 2 years later, and now he was assigned to Lila Monroe's case. When he called her that night, his voice smooth as glass, she felt her stomach flip. "Hey," he said casually, "heard you're covering the Monroe case on your show." She forced a neutral tone. "Just doing my job." "Yeah," he paused. "Be careful what you dig up, Tasha." The line went dead. The warning felt more like a threat.
Her next episode recording felt like walking barefoot across broken glass. She clicked the mic on. "This case," she said, breathing through her nerves, "feels different." It was the most honest thing she'd said on air in years. "It feels like it knows me." Her listeners heard the quiver. They felt the shift. They flooded her DMs. "Tasha, are you okay? Your tone is different lately. Is something wrong? This case seems personal. Why?" Reddit threads erupted overnight. r/unspoken crimes. Discussion. Episode 37. Why does Tasha sound so scared? u/audioaddict94. She paused for like 10 seconds before the outro. Anyone else catch that? u/podqueenxo. Did she cry? Like, for real cry? u/riverwatcher13. This case is connected to her somehow. I can feel it. Tasha ignored them all. Instead, she grabbed her coat and began tracking Lila's last movements. She visited the bar where Lila was last seen. It smelled like spilled tequila and old heartbreak. The bartender remembered Lila, said she was laughing, talking to friends, not drunk enough to be sloppy. Tasha asked for CCTV. The man shrugged. Police already took what they needed. But Tasha knew how to get what the police didn't consider useful. So she waited until closing, slipped the janitor $50, and waited. 40 minutes later, she watched grainy footage on an ancient office television. Lila leaving the bar at 11:54 p.m., her curls bouncing as she walked, her phone in her hand, her smile relaxed. Then, a shadow behind her, a tall figure, steady gait, familiar shape. The footage glitched for 2 seconds, came back. The man stepped closer, too close. A face turned toward the camera for a fraction of a second. Tasha froze the frame. Her pulse thundered. Then she zoomed in. The image clarified just enough to see him. Marcus, her ex-boyfriend, her former nightmare, the man who once told her what she could and could not say, the man who had accidentally killed her best friend, the man now walking behind Lila Monroe. Her stomach turned. Her hands went clammy. She stumbled out of the office and into the alley, vomiting against the wall. That night she drove to Marcus's house. Her recorder was in her pocket, its red light blinking like a frantic heartbeat. The street was quiet. The lights in his house were off, but his car was in the driveway. She rang the doorbell once, twice. The door unlocked. He opened it wearing a casual smile, like he'd been expecting her, like he wasn't surprised at all. "You shouldn't have dug that deep," he said softly. Her blood went cold. "What did you do to Lila?" she asked. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "What I had to," he said. "What I always have to." Tasha's voice cracked. "And Kira?" she asked. His smile faded. His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened with something ugly. "Kira shouldn't have pushed me that night. She got loud. You know how she got." "No," Tasha whispered. "Don't do that. Don't blame her." He shrugged. "She slipped, hit her head. You panicked, and I cleaned it up. We agreed to that." "I was 17, Tasha snapped. "I was scared of you." "You loved me," he corrected. "I feared you," she said. The air between them thickened. He stepped closer. "You should have stayed quiet, Tosh." When he reached for her arm, she flinched, and the recorder in her pocket captured everything. Every confession, every lie, every word he had tried to bury. She left his house shaking so hard she could barely unlock her car. The next morning she recorded her final episode. No intro music, no scripted notes, just truth. The title, "The Murder I Helped Hide." Millions of listeners heard Marcus's confession first. Raw, unedited, damning. Then came Tasha's voice, breaking, trembling, vulnerable in ways her audience had never heard. She told them about Kira, about that night in 2013, about the lies she told to protect herself and the man she thought she loved, about the guilt that had been rotting inside her for a decade. She ended with, "Silence doesn't just protect the guilty, it destroys the innocent, including yourself." Within hours, her episode hit #1 worldwide. By evening, police arrested Marcus Green for both murders, Kira's and Lila's. Tasha turned herself in. Accessory after the fact. Obstruction. Cooperation accounted for, but not erased. She served 2 years. It was the first time in 10 years she could sleep without waking up screaming. When she walked out of prison, the air tasted different, sharper, real. She launched a new show, Unspoken Redemption. Its first episode opened with a line listeners never forgot. "The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it destroys everything you built. But what's left after is real." Her story became a warning, a legacy, a lesson carved from bone. That silence, no matter how noble it feels, always serves the guilty. And sometimes the hardest justice you will ever pursue is the truth about yourself. Before the followers, before the media deals, before she became the woman people trusted with their dead daughters' names, there was a 17-year-old girl who thought she knew the world. Back in 2013, Tasha Williams wasn't brave. She wasn't strong. She didn't speak for the voiceless. She was just scared. Back then, Kira Johnson was the fearless one, the friend who dragged Tasha out of her shell, who wore neon colors and hoop earrings big enough to signal confidence, who always smelled like coconut lotion and cheap body glitter. Kira was sunshine wrapped in attitude. And Marcus was gravity, the kind that pulled you whether you wanted it or not. He was 20, older, charming in the way dangerous people often are. Everyone knew him in the neighborhood, the kind of boy fathers warned their daughters about, but daughters ignored anyway. He had a reputation, controlling, quick-tempered, always watching. Tasha thought his attention meant she mattered. Kira thought otherwise. "Girl," she said once, braiding Tasha's hair on a porch steps, "love is not supposed to feel like you owe somebody your whole throat just to keep them calm." Tasha brushed it off. Back then, she brushed everything off. She didn't brush off the night that changed her life. Not anymore.
It was hot, that thick Michigan heat that makes the whole sky feel heavy. Kira wanted to dance. Tasha didn't. Marcus showed up halfway through. He was already in a mood. Tasha could tell from the way he scanned the crowd, jaw clenched. He hated when Tasha had fun without him. He hated that Kira encouraged it. Witnesses would later say they saw Marcus and Kira arguing by the rocks, but witnesses, it turns out, don't talk when the police shrug off a black girl's death. Tasha remembered the sound. Kira shouting, Marcus yelling, then a scream, a splash, the kind of splash that makes your bones ring. Tasha ran toward the riverbank. She saw just enough. Marcus on the rocks, chest heaving, staring down at something she couldn't bring herself to look at. "Tasha," he said, voice shaking, "listen to me. She slipped. You know how clumsy she is. The rocks were wet." He grabbed her shoulders with hands that trembled too much for the story he was telling. "If you say otherwise, they'll blame you too. You were here. You're involved." She was 17. He was all she had. She believed him, or she forced herself to. They went home separately. Tasha locked the door, curled up on her bed, and cried into her pillow until sunrise. By the time she gathered the courage to tell someone, the police had already stamped the case, accidental drowning, case closed. But Tasha heard that scream every night for 10 years. Back in the present, she couldn't avoid the truth anymore. Every time she looked in a mirror, she didn't see the successful host of unspoken crimes. She saw the 17-year-old who kept quiet. She saw cowardice. Her listeners often called her fearless. They had no idea she built her entire career on fear. The anonymous email only twisted the knife. Wonder what really happened to Kira Johnson. Who sent it? Someone from her past? A listener who caught her tone? A ghost? It didn't matter, because the past wasn't knocking. It was kicking down the door. Lila Monroe was everything Kira could have become if she'd lived. Bright, trusting, working a part-time hospital job to pay for nursing school. As Tasha combed through Lila's final week, she realized how easily Lila trusted people who smiled the right way, stood the right way, spoke with confidence. Just like Tasha once did. One friend said, Lila always wanted to believe the best in people, even when she shouldn't. The words hit Tasha like a bruise forming beneath skin. Before episode 37, Tasha never thought about how well her listeners knew her voice. She underestimated them. Within days, forums were exploding. r/True Crime Radio. Thread, Unspoken Crimes. Why does Tasha sound traumatized? U/Audio Nerd 88. She said this case knows me. Bro, what does that mean? U/Suspicious Potato. I bet she knows the victim's family. U/Black girls deserve justice. Her voice cracked. Something happened to her. Something big. Then, someone posted a clip of Tasha's pause, that long, shaky inhale before she continued speaking. People replayed it 10,000 times, analyzed it like a crime scene. The world didn't know it, but they were listening to guilt slip through the cracks. She replayed the footage again and again. Lila steps out of the bar. Marcus appears 3 seconds later. He stays behind her, never beside her, like a predator waiting for a moment. At timestamp 11:55:23, his face turned toward the camera. That was the moment Tasha's past and present collided, like two cars on a wet road. It wasn't just recognition, it was dread. She zoomed in until the pixels distorted. It was still him, the same man who once whispered in her ear that loyalty meant silence. The same man who held her trembling body on the night Kira died. The same man who now had access to police databases, crime scenes, and victims. Her breath turned shallow. Her lungs refused air. She realized something horrible. She had spent her career advocating for victims, while the killer of her best friend became a detective around young women just like Kira. She wasn't just a witness, she was part of the enabling, and she couldn't pretend otherwise anymore. When Marcus opened the door, he looked like the same boy she once loved, until he didn't. His smile was too calm, too practiced, too knowing. "Tasha," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "I always knew you'd come back to me." That sentence alone turned her blood to ice. Everything in the conversation felt off, rehearsed, prepared, like he had been living with the expectation that she would eventually crack. "You're ruining your life," he said. "You keep digging and the whole world will know what you did." "What you did," she snapped. He didn't deny it. He shifted his weight. His jaw twitched. Then the truth slid out of him like oil. "Kira got loud. She wouldn't calm down. I pushed her. She hit her head. You panicked. I cleaned it up. End of story." "End of story?" she whispered. He stepped closer. "I told you then, and I'm telling you now, don't ruin what's working." "What's working?" she repeated, horrified. "You're a cop. You killed 2 girls." He shrugged. "You think I'm the first cop with a record?" She recoiled. And that moment, her breath quickening, her feet stumbling back, was caught on the recorder in her pocket. Every threat, every admission, every deflection. It captured the monster behind the badge.
She uploaded it at 9:42 a.m. She didn't add music, didn't edit the background noise, didn't hide her tears. The episode trended on Twitter in 2 hours, hit #1 on Apple's charts in 4. Major outlets picked it up by nightfall. CNN breaking. Podcast host releases alleged confession of Michigan detective. BBC News. Unspoken Crimes episode accuses U.S. detective of murder. YouTube commentary channels. Tasha Green just blew the lid off true crime. People didn't just listen. They dissected, cried, raged, sympathized. They heard Marcus threatening her. They heard his voice twist with pride. They heard a killer confess in the most public way possible. They heard a woman fall apart and put herself on the line for a girl she couldn't save. Tasha was sentenced to 2 years. She didn't fight it, didn't ask for special treatment, didn't cry when the cell door closed. She felt relief. There is something strange about the honesty of prison. There's no pretending there, no hiding. She learned who she was. Not the girl who kept quiet, not the host who sounded composed, not the woman the internet idolized. Just a person who made a terrible choice and finally stopped running from it. She wrote while she was inside. Journals, episode drafts, letters to Kira's family she never sent. The most important sentence she wrote was this: "I spent years telling stories about silence. I forgot to tell my own." When she stepped out of prison 2 years later, the outside air felt like a new language she had to relearn. She didn't expect fans waiting for her, but there they were. Not hundreds, not a mob, just 3 women holding a small banner. "We forgive you. Now help us forgive ourselves." Tasha cried harder at that than she had at her sentencing. She stayed quiet for 4 months. Then she made a decision. If silence created monsters, maybe truth could create something else. She opened her laptop and recorded the first episode of her new show, Unspoken Redemption. Her voice was steady,
warm, older somehow. She said, "This podcast isn't about the stories I tell. It's about the ones we try to bury." Her listeners waited, held their breath. She ended the episode with the line that would become the show's signature. "The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it ruins your life. But if it ruins the lie you were living, that's a kind of freedom too." Her story became a warning, a blueprint, a mirror, a reminder that justice isn't only about catching killers. Sometimes it's about facing the person staring back at you in the dark, the one who kept quiet when they should have screamed. And the lesson she carved into the world like a scar: silence serves the guilty. Truth saves the living.